Welcome to the final series of the Incredible Talent Framework, brought to you by Emergent and ClayHR. My name is Neha Berry and I belong to ClayHR. Thank you for joining us. Please take a moment, be comfortable, and we are about to start the series. Okay, let's get started, and I'd like to extend a warm welcome to our awesome speakers over here. And let's introduce first the chairman and the CEO to Emergent, Alex. He has a 30-plus year career in professional services, and he led the development of VFQ, one of the industry's leading work-based learning and transformation products specific to agility, portfolio product management, and business leadership. He has an extensive background in large enterprise and startup organizations alongside PE and VC operational roles. He's a published author and active speaker and contributor to organizations such as Forbes, an international advisory board member of the Drucker Society. Through his publications and certifications, his main aim is to influence the way people think about the change and to improve the way the people work. And thank you for designing the webinar series. And we have enjoyed every bit of them. And thank you for the enriching experience over here. Moving forward, we have our next speaker, that is Dr. Amrinder Arora. He is the co-founder and CEO to ClayHR. Over 2 decades of industry experience in technology and product development. He's envisioned and designed products that are currently used by 8 million people on a daily basis, such as FDA's Predict Risk targeting system. He's an expert in the field of AI with over 40 peer-reviewed research publications and teaches graduate-level AI and algorithm class at George Washington University. Well, you are an asset to ClayHR's workforce. Moving forward, we have the agenda of our today's webinar, our journey with ClayHR and VFQs, why performance management needs to change, and we have the recap of the beautiful series by Incredible Talent Framework, that is Command of the Business, Smart Work Ethics, Consistent Follow-ups and Follow-through, Philosophically Aligned and in the Right Role, and then we're going to talk about Emergent, and then finally we have the question and answer. Please feel free to ask your questions in the chat box and we'll address to them at the end of the webinar.
I think Neha, it's probably just a good reminder to everyone, if just on the previous slide here, that in case they missed any of the previous webinars, they can kind of see the. Sorry, could you go back? Yeah, if they did miss any of the previous webinars on the Command of the Business, Smart Work Ethic, there are video recordings available, so they can just ask you, and you can. Maybe in the webinar summary, you can actually send the links to those as well. So in case they missed it, they're welcome to watch those as well.
You can please subscribe to the YouTube channel by ClayHR. You can find all of the recordings over there. Moving forward, we have the first slide, and Amrinder, over to you.
I think we'll probably makes more sense for Alex to start, since I think Alex would be able to maybe give a little overview here. Alex, I think if you'd like to start, you can start, and I'm happy to cover whatever part.
Okay, all right. Well, Neha, thank you for the kind introduction. And Amrinder, thank you again. I just want to also publicly say on the webinar, this has been a great series. I'm very privileged that you asked us to do this with you, given the collaboration. I hope people that have made the investment to listen have found it valuable. So we have this slide just to kind of remind ourselves that asking the right questions is a huge part of doing the right level of performance management, and that comes also with having the right tools, right? So the whole basis of this is how we've been able to leverage our framework and ClayHR to make it possible for us to run what we think is a world-class performance management process. So if we go to the next slide, we can dive in. So Neha mentioned VFQ in my bio. What is VFQ and why does it matter? So every company has something that makes them who they are. And I think for us, we have this acronym that stands for value, flow, and quality. These are 3 outcomes that all of our customers want to experience when we work with them and we run big pieces of transformation programs or change programs. The idea is helping them do what these principles state on the bottom left. And this is how we've become, I guess, very focused and specific in our industry. And we've had the privilege of working with several enterprise clients over the years. But VFQ for us is a lens. We see the world through these three principles because they help us deliver exceptional work, which leads, of course, to having incredible talent. And I think this is one of the reasons we can discuss this this topic here.
Mm-hmm.
So on the next slide, one of the things that we wanted to talk about in the previous webinars, we've tried to pull in some industry information, talk about what the market's discussing. And you know, we have there's so many reports, but one of the interesting reports we came across from SHRM was the assessment they did over 2022 all the way through the end of 2023 on what are the highest priorities that HR professionals see. Now, SHRM is a large global HR consortium. They've got over 330,000 members. So I think it's a good sample size for us when we're looking at topics like this. I wasn't surprised to see that in the top two, you've got morale and engagement, and then retention as being the most important priorities. And I think in the spirit of discussing philosophical alignment today and being in the right role, you really are driving towards these two, right? And the idea of being philosophically aligned, which we'll get into in a moment, really does come down to the morale that the organization is experiencing, how engaged I am as an employee, and whether that ultimately leads to me wanting to stay and be part of the journey. One of the biggest challenges we all face, and I mean all of us, is retaining the best people in the business. You can't stop people from saying, I want to move on, I got a better job opportunity, and we always wish them the best. But we can do more to help keep them interested and engaged in the business and not let lack of engagement or lack of interaction play a decision in their leaving. And I think this is why morale, engagement, and retention clearly make the top 1 and 2 in this report. The others, of course, are equally important, but I guess in the spirit of our conversation today, I just found this interesting. So we can move on to the next slide. First poll question, right? And Nihal will run this for us, but what words or phrases would you associate most when you hear things like philosophically aligned and in the right role? I'm curious to see your response.
I think the polls are open, but Alex, this question was, you know, as I discussed, I think you and I discussed before, I find it to be very insightful because I think people look at the same exact thing and they might have a different angle to it. They say, okay, this is philosophically aligned with the organization because they have these attributes or they have some other attributes, because even though everybody agrees with the end result, but I think it's also important that they agree with how they're going to be able to measure it, right? So I think in that sense, I see this to be very, very valuable here. And I think people have a few seconds to respond to it.
Fluctuating. I mean, like I'm watching in front. I mean, like the one I had thought would get most numbers, the percentage is declining. I mean, like people first think that it is the A option, and suddenly they start thinking, no, oh no, this is the C one. Oh no, I don't know. They're playing.
So let's give.
Okay, let's close the poll and let's share the result. Okay.
Oh, wow. So I don't know, Alex, what you think about this one here.
19% believes in the business. 19% has the heart of the company. 0% says shows up well. Now 50 is the role plays to their strength. 13 adaptable where needed.
So Alex, what do you see about this?
Oh, I'm not sure if I should really tell you what I see, but I'll try to say it delicately. I guess what I see when I see these kinds of results is that there might be, first of all, not a complete understanding on the definition of what we mean by philosophically aligned and in the right role, which is fair. We haven't covered it yet. So But if the responses are based on understanding it, and 50% are saying the role plays to their strength, then that tells me it's a very individual and very personalized response, meaning this is about how I feel in my job, that the role is giving me the chance to do what I do best. It doesn't mean that so much that I have to believe in the company, or I even have to be, have the heart of the business. I clearly don't have to show up well, which is really surprising. And whether I'm adaptable where I'm needed, not sure that's really important, as long as I'm doing what I do best. So very interesting response. What do you see, Amanda?
I mean, I think I agree with you on that the role plays to their strength part, that it seems that people believe that if the role works for them, it's a little bit more, like you said, individualistic choice. But I think the other 50% did say, because ultimately everybody just chose one, so they did think about other things. So I know that particular vote is a little split out, but yeah, I think I agree with you on your assessment there.
Okay.
I had thought the poll would, has the heart of the company would win it.
Okay, so let's move on and let's see.
I'll move on.
How Alex wants to educate.
Okay. Now, the next is we have a brief recap of the Incredible Talent Framework series once again. And okay.
Sure. So let's spend just a couple minutes. We've been through this a few times. Just wanted to remind everyone, this is the framework that we use at Emergn. I'll show you how it lives inside the Clay HR system in a moment. And we've been through 3 of these principles on the webinars. We'll wrap up the last 2 today, but just as a quick recap, this framework was designed for us to have both a soft skills and a hard skills approach to performance management. So it was the ability to take the progression frameworks we've designed for each functional area of the business and the roles within those areas, but also then look at the behaviors, the values, the thinking, the cultural influence that anyone can play inside the company. And we did this because these are the same kinds of things we actually talk about with our own customers when we're doing our work. One of the biggest aspects of our work is mindset shift. We teach people how to think differently about work. We're not just doing consulting. We're not just writing software code. We're also teaching them how to work differently. And this is one of the most important things we could do for our own employees. So we can go to the next slide, Neha.
Okay.
So in theory, this is how it works. We start by developing a talent profile for each person. This profile is created with the employee and the manager. They do something called co-creation. We encourage this, that they do it together, so they can both have input, influence, buy-in on what the profile looks like. This then leads to the ability for those 2 individuals to agree and assign objectives, so they know what the work needs to be for the role, how we're going to measure that work, what we can expect for good outcomes, and then scheduling those regular check-in discussions that are very important to keeping the conversation open and engaged. And then we do retrospectives, right? We kind of look back and assess the journey. The individuals have conversations on a regular basis on how things are going, what adjustments or changes need to be made. This is the only way performance management works well. It's a conversation, and it's a regular series of check-ins. It can't be, at least the way we've seen it, it can't be just a one and done conversation every quarter or twice a year. It has to be more engaging. Now, while that sounds like a lot of work, to say, well, I may have, so many direct reports, I'm going to spend my whole week talking to people. Sure, there is that element, but this is why building this into a system makes sense. So if we go to the next slide, we can kind of show you how it works out in theory inside the Clay HR platform. So what we did.
If I may just quickly add one thing. I think the picture that Alex painted in the previous slide here, I think there's well enough acceptance within the industry that performance is not one and done strategy. You have to have a continuous performance strategy, whether you're going to do your regular check-ins, you're going to set up some kind of SMART goals, OKRs, you're still going to have your performance reviews, you're going to have your kudos, etc. What I like about this particular approach is that, we from our perspective, from Clay HR perspective, we can provide the tools, but then what is the process? What is the framework around it? Which is why I'm excited about how Alex has laid it out throughout the series. That, okay, the tools are what they are, but how are you going to structure those conversations around it? That's really the key here. And sure, it may seem like a lot of work, but again, that's the aspect of building a high functioning team, that you actually have those ongoing conversations to build the talent profile, have those objectives, have the ongoing support to do that. But I think as the rest of the industry is calling it the check-ins and all of that, again, those are software components, but this is sort of the framework on how it can really work.
Exactly, and I think that is the huge point, right? It's the human conversation that still needs to happen, and we shouldn't be apologizing by saying, "Oh, you may have to talk to people more often." I mean, you're right. This is the exact basis for why we need to do it, to build a high-performing team, because we throw around the words, right? High-performing team and check-ins, but they do get lost in translation. So one of the key things we've done on the Clay HR platform is we've built in this process flow. We've built in the way a manager and an employee interact with the system to publish and kick off the events that have to happen and contribute to those conversations. And again, it's not something they just put into the system and they forget it. We use the system as the reference point to have the dialogue. So on the next slide, I can show you, for example, how a typical employee may get started, right? We do this profile assessment I mentioned that's co-created. We put in some of the criteria in the weighting. If you look at this screen capture, you can see we have the first two framework principles here: command of the business and smart work ethic. And what we do is we grade them, right? We set a weighting for each, and if there's 5, each are weighted at 20%, equaling 100%. And then we kind of build in an objective or 2 objectives in this case for each of the principles. So it's very straightforward. These, again, they're done together with the employee and the manager, and they assign the criteria for scoring. And then when we get to the next slide, the way this actually plays out, it plays out in objective setting becoming realized. So if we go to the next slide, we can show you another screenshot. And you can see here for this employee's objectives that we captured under those first 2 principles, what's the weighting in terms of how they achieve them. So visually it works. It's a very clean layout on the system. The data is what the data needs to be. We've made it and simplified it on Clay HR so we can work through it at a pace. And I think this is why we're seeing a really high level of engagement from both managers and employees using the system, because it's straightforward and encourages the conversations.
Yeah, I think just to mention the slides, and while Neha, if you would like, you can launch the poll, and I can talk during the time to let people give some time to answer the poll as well.
Yeah.
In the slides that Alex was presenting to, the people might have noticed that maybe your environment, maybe your Clay HR environment kind of looks a little different. Again, as you may know, or maybe your site admin may know, the menus, etc., can be configured. So that's how the background and the colors, etc., look a little different. But I think some of those underlying elements, I'm sure people recognize the OKRs and those nested key results, which sometimes have other nested key results there. Again, I think the main important point that I would like to reiterate is the way Alex has laid out, Alex's team has laid this out, that sparks that ongoing conversation. That's the reason the people stay engaged. Okay, let's go to the poll here, but I think that conversation part remains the key part.
Right.
So we're looking at the job profile, whether it accurately reflects your daily responsibilities. Let's see if people agree with that.
Let's close the poll and let's share the results. And here you have the result.
Okay. Well, this is positive. I think it's mostly accurate and completely. Those are good. I guess it also supports the previous, plays to their strengths, so they feel that it's important that the role's playing to their strengths, but equally then mapping it to a profile that is explaining it exactly or as best as it could be in terms of its alignment. So I think this is a fair outcome.
Yeah. Okay, let's move forward then. And the next slide is, okay.
Okay, so a lot of words here. So let me just kind of cover it at a high level. What do we mean when we mean these two principles that we're doing together today in this final webinar series? So philosophical alignment has these 5 components. It's the idea that an employee believes in what we're doing. They have the heart of the company. And what this means, it doesn't mean that, they have the heart of the company at the expense of their own goals. So when we say prioritizes the company's goals versus their own goals, we're not saying that their goals aren't important, their ambitions aren't important. Of course they are. Otherwise, how would you have career development and career advancement? But they also understand that their role, their contribution, is not just about them, that it actually plays up to contributing to the success of the whole organization. And they value that. That's the heart of the company, where your goals matter, but you also are part of a team that is working together towards an ultimate outcome. And I guess this is one where you're not ever going to have the whole organization aligned to that, but you will have and could have a good amount. And that then leads to showing up well. Like, this is the way they behave in the business. There's respect. There's integrity in the process. They're supporting their company. Then they're contributing to the culture. Number 4, you see them actively engaged. And they're either, some of them are initiators, or not just responders to helping topics, events, things that make a difference in the business. They're part of those things. And ultimately, when we think about being philosophically aligned, we also see employees in the business that are actively building up other people, right? They're encouragers, they're motivators, they're inspirers. They're looking for ways to be helpful and supportive. So it's not just about them. This is why philosophical alignment I've seen missed in many companies I've worked with over the years before Emergn. And we also saw it as a challenge in the early years of our company. And we had to sit down and say, look, you're never going to get every employee to be fully engaged or bought in the way maybe you think they should. But what is important to help them understand what we do expect, and how do we take on responsibility as leaders and managers to bring them on that journey? And part of that is explaining to people what you expect when you say it, because then you can translate it into some things I'll talk about when we talk about how we measure it. And then ultimately, it led to the 5th principle in the framework, which was in the right role. And if I didn't say it earlier, these 5 principles in the framework are in a particular order. And because one kind of supports and leads to the next, it's a flow. And in the right role, well, we've seen the majority of people say, yep, plays to their strength. I agree with that one. If it's playing to their strength, we naturally see them excelling in that role. In other words, it's obvious to all of them that, everyone that, oh, clearly that person is designed for this job. Like, this makes sense. And then you see the ability to continuously improve. They're investing in their learning and development to be better in the role. But they're also being an active role model. I think this is one of the things, again, where we want to make sure, being ambitious and having individual goals doesn't mean that we forget how to be a role model for those that we work with in the company, maybe those coming up in the business behind us, or our peers. but they also have the adaptability component. And I think this is really important. We encourage people to be open to changing jobs and being more cross-functional if it helps the company. I mean, I can't speak from everyone on the call, but in my career, I've been in companies where organizations deliberately would change the job of leaders and executives every 2 years so they got experience in other parts of the business. Now, I'm not saying that that's what this means, but the reason they did that is the very reason this is an important point. You want people to be adaptable. If I see that you're an amazing salesperson, but I also see that you have an eye for marketing and you really get the value proposition right, maybe we ask you to do a marketing job, for a couple of years. I don't know, but this is something that obviously makes a lot of sense. So I think we have a poll question next, and Amrinder, you had a comment, so please jump in.
Yeah. No, I think on this slide, I mean, sorry, Neha, if you go back for a moment, we'll go to the poll question. But I think this is really the key. And I think, Alex, it's possible we are thinking about the same previous company, maybe. So I'm also familiar with that, exactly the 2-year role there. So I agree with you entirely that the reason those organizations do that is exactly for those reasons. To understand and to promote the adaptability to shift. Many times some organizations will say, hey, you've been great in this role here. Would you like to do this thing? Now, we see some organizations doing that for 3 months only, which is also interesting because from 3 months, it's clearly is an investment from the organization's perspective because it's usually going to take the person first 2 months or almost 3 months just to even learn the business before they're able to make real contributions. But still having a smaller segment of their time when they're going to be working in a different department for 3 to 6 months is a very common aspect. Now I do see that the place to strengthen being excelling in the role almost comes in from the people who, if they say they're in the right role, they're usually going to do well. But then the third part, the commitment to improve, is very much self-driven. If they are, because many times the organizations, from a HR perspective, there'll be learnings in the system, but what we measure is how often are the customer and the customer employees actually taking part in the training. And for people who do use the training module, you might be familiar that there's a setting in the training module that when you create a training or learning, you can make it to be self-assignable. Then we can measure how often is a self-assignable training actually getting assigned, and then more than that, actually getting completed. So if you can build that culture that the employees the team members are looking to continuously improve, then you can certainly have a well-functioning team, because as we all know, in this time and age, the competencies have a shorter shelf life. What is a hot skill today, within 18 months, that can become, hey, everybody knows that, now where do we go next? So if there's commitment in 3, that makes it important. And to go to number 4 here, the active role model, again, in the skills module, in HR, you do see that you can mark some people as skill counselors or skill mentors. If you are able to do that and your team members are able to actually play the role of the mentor, not merely say, yes, I'll be a mentor, but when somebody comes, ask me, then I say, I'm too busy, right? If you can actually build that, then that really places you on a fast step forward to follow the framework that Alex is slowly laying out throughout this series here. Hey, let's build a commitment to improve. Let's build that active role model. Then you can say that, hey, yes, you're completing all the segments of being in the right role. So Alex, I just wanted to
that's great.
Internalize it. Great. Okay, so let's go on to the next question here.
In my organization, all career pathways, also called career leaders, are known.
So I think this may go along with the, okay, let's give people like 30 seconds to assign to that. But this essentially could go with the people might think they're in the right role, but then what is the next role that's going to come for them? let's give people a few seconds here to answer.
It's quite interesting because a lot of people say that yes, and some people are possibly.
Let's not influence yet because people are still answering.
Oh, that's right.
I know that you can probably see the results, but if they are still answering, that let's give them a moment. But yeah, once you close it, of course, feel free to discuss it.
Okay. Mm.
Yeah, should we go on to the results?
Okay, and here we are. I'll share them. Yeah.
Okay. I guess this is good.
Yeah. Okay, so let's move on.
Okay.
Okay, so just some examples on how we measure these things. Again, just trying to work through them systematically. So when we think about believing in the business around philosophical alignment, we do things like surveys, right? We do active surveys, we get feedback. We have very pointed questions on asking about, corporate strategy, things that we're doing to advance our objectives, and we're looking for insights in terms of how people think about the business and where we're headed and alignment. So surveys are one way to help us understand the belief in the business. Heart of the company, that strictly comes through doing performance reviews, the way we've been discussing it today in the webinar, making sure there's alignment between someone's personal goals and the company goals and how those come together. When we look at do people show up professionally, we're really looking at the quality of the work. So regardless of the role, we're looking to understand is the work representative of the emergent brand promise? Is it supportive and helping people understand what value we're bringing? Do we get good feedback from external stakeholders, customers, external colleagues, partners that we work with? If it's contributing to the culture, we look at engagement levels. Again, some of that could come through engaging in a survey. Some of that will come through performance review. But some of that is also the human aspect that you see in the business around how people engage. Are they showing up for company events? Do they participate in local or regional things that we're running? And are they actively involved? You can see if people are participating. And then building up others, this is also another way that we kind of visually observe this, right? Are people connecting? We actually help and sponsor a number of internal planned events to help encourage connections, build belonging in the business. And, if people are engaged and active, this is one way of building others up. And then if you look at in the right role, playing to their strengths, we do that by doing both competency and skills analysis that helps validate that strength is being actively engaged, is at the right level, we're getting what we want from it. We see the performance reviews supporting on whether or not they're excelling in the role. And then, when they continue to improve, this is both the manager and the employee being intentional about having a career development or an L&D plan that can be tracked and managed. This is not passive. This is sitting down with the person and understanding what they're looking to do to become better in the job, or what other skills do we encourage them to go learn. Being an active role model, that's another one that goes back to observation and engagement. And then, of course, the adaptability to shift. You see this in the business. You see someone's involvement and contribution outside the job they're in. You see how they're engaging. And through that, the conversations play out, and we can measure, sometimes subjectively, but we can capture and measure that, this is a person that if we need them to play out a different part of the team, we can go have that conversation. And Rinder, what would you add here? Anything?
I think mostly, what you're saying is exactly the right way. But one other thing I think to consider is that And sorry, let me get this window out of the way here. I was looking at the questions as well. I think one other thing to keep in mind is, and I know you have talked about in the course of the previous series here, is just like how people contribute to the culture as well as how they build up others. That's really the key, because if they're going to be able to mentor as well as essentially encourage people to fill those roles, I think that makes for a strong organization and confirms a little bit about their alignment. I think that to me seems like a little bit of, maybe if you can give an example or two of that more, I think that'll probably help us as well.
Sorry, I muted so I didn't interrupt. So which two?
The last one, actually, really, that's the last one, building up the others.
Yeah, so building up the others, so what do we mean? Connects with others through planned and unplanned activities. So as I said, specifically the way we try and do this is we have budgeted in our locations around the world, we have local regions. Every region has what we call a belonging budget. And a belonging budget is a small amount of money per person that's pooled together, and managers are encouraged to plan and lead activities. Maybe they're going to run a local marathon. Maybe they're going to do a learning session in the office. Maybe they're going to have some kind of community activity. But they use the belonging budget to get employees involved, so they actually participate in helping build up both others in the business, but also doing something that's encouraging to culture, morale, maybe a good cause. And usually through these kinds of planned activities, and I know it says unplanned because sometimes people just organize something on the side, you see where the philosophical alignment is. You see the ones that are, leading the others or actively engaged and being the most vocal. So that's one way we do it, through a belonging budget that has planned activities, and that helps highlight who is actually a builder, an encourager on the team.
By the way, there's a question on this as well. I think maybe it goes to the previous slide. We probably don't need to go to that, but maybe it's the right time to kind of I'll pose the question to you anyway, Alex. Dorothy asks, like in one of the slides where you put the philosophical alignment towards the end, why not kind of just start with that? Like in the 5-step, why not just putting at the end of the flow? Would it make sense to just
Well, it's a good question. It's a good question. The answer actually was given to us in the first poll question, right? 50% of the people chose the role placed to their strength. They didn't choose shows up well. They didn't choose heart of the company. They didn't choose believes in the business. So right there, the answer tells us that people don't care about the first, they don't care about philosophical alignment as much as they care about, am I in the right job? So if it's about you being in the right job, then we need to know that you have command of the business. We need to know that you have a smart work ethic. We need to know that you do follow up and follow through. In other words, we need to see that you're bringing the behaviors that contribute to the business success and the role success before we're going to sit down and expect you to be philosophically aligned, right? I mean, let's take a sports team analogy. Every year there's a draft. Sports teams go and draft new and old players, especially the old ones that come from other teams that are seasoned professionals. They don't show up and have philosophical alignment. They show up and think, what role am I going to play first? Okay, if we're talking the NFL, you hired me, brought me in as a quarterback. Okay, let me go out and prove myself. They usually have to learn the system, and they have to understand the playbook, and that helps them become part of the team, and they buy into the culture and the alignment. We see that happens further down the line typically before they get to philosophical alignment. So that's been our experience. I'm not saying, Dorothy, you can't put it first. In fact, in your organization, if there was a way to do it and you wanted to do it, you could flip any one of these around. But in our experience, we find that getting them to do the job components is a first thing. Getting them to be bought in seems to be a second thing.
That's really fascinating. I must admit I had not thought about either the question or the answer, but now that makes total sense. That when you're going to bring somebody in, and I know you gave the NFL analogy, but as a general talent acquisition play, if you're going to hire and you say, hey, we need to have a React developer, then you're going to hire that person as a React developer, and that person is going to say, hey, I know this thing and I know I can get better, I can make a good contribution, and over time, hopefully, you know, with the meetings that Alex, you pointed out, you'll bring them in and you'll kind of align them over time to the business. But first, when they're coming in, they're just coming in to be that specific role, whether it's a linebacker for NFL or a dual, you know. So I think that's really key. Okay, thank you, Dorothy, for asking the question. I didn't mean to go all the way into Q&A here, but I thought that was just relevant to go into. So let's go. We have a lot more questions, by the way. And if you're waiting, please go ahead and ask your question already. We'll try to get through as many of them as you like here, but let's give Alex back the floor so he can go through the slides, and we'll cover as many questions as we can.
So we can go to the next one. So I think this one and the next one, Amrinder, you were going to talk a little bit about the value system piece.
Yeah, just this part here, and this kind of concept comes up in many different plays as well. So essentially, through the service module, and here you can see that the menu, etc., looks a little different because this is coming from what the general screens can look like, not specific to how Alex and the team have configured their system. But essentially, when the surveys are conducted, to be able to see exactly where people stand, so that you can guide them towards who needs what exactly. So both this slide, and as well as if you can go to the next one as well. Yeah, the understanding of this thing is just to say that make sure that you're pulling your, and the same construct actually comes in many different applications, whether you're trying to find out what are the right levels of learnings that people need, what are the right projects that you can form from it, what are the attributes that you can collect from that. So the surveys is an intrinsic piece that allows you to play that in a variety of settings here. Specifically to Alex's use case here, essentially collecting doing this value assessment helps their team in being able to drive the next actions there. Let's go on to the next one and bring that last poll question on here.
So this is our final one. Yeah.
And since we understand many people who join the webinars are active users, so in that case we understand what's an answer that they're likely to give. But still, even so, many organizations, even though if they have access to a certain module or a functionality, they might or might not be using it to drive the right business outcomes here. So that's the reason that this question is out there. Let's give people maybe 10 more seconds, Neha, before we.
That's it. 10, 15 more seconds more.
Sure. And in the meantime, I'm going to take another look at questions here.
Okay. Okay, so we'll share the results.
Okay. So there are some people who are saying it's neutral. So they want to start, but they're just evaluating options. So they are not. Well, I mean, if you are actively within Clay HR, then, you know, that's just a module that's commonly available to most. You can take a look at it. And of course, the whole idea is that whatever tools you use, as long as you can use that to drive your business outcomes here in general, that's helpful. And Alex, if you want to tie specifically to the ITJ, I mean, to the framework, please feel free to do that again.
Yeah, well, no, I think the results are great. I mean, if you've got 62% of people actively using a system, then that's great. I think, I guess the concern is never are people using a system. It's more, are they, as you said much earlier today, are they having the human conversations that support the backdrop of the system, right? So I think I would expect the percentage to be high that people are either completely bought in and using something, or they've already identified it and have taken the investment decision. So the percentage return is probably accurate.
Yeah, that's right. So Neha, yeah, you can move on, but I think you're right that the essentially, I mean, usage is a good first step here, but the question here is on how do you have those conversations after. Alex, if you would like, you can wrap up those the 2 slides here first, and then I'll ask. I have quite a few questions here.
No problem. I won't. This will take 30 seconds, right? Just to kind of remind everyone, this is the work we do. We are a global digital business company, so we help companies figure out what do they mean when they say big words like digital. So we help companies with thinking differently about work. We do a lot of upskilling, reskilling of people in key roles that help drive transformation. So it's not about just IT or business, it's how do you bring people together in a common environment to look at end-to-end product delivery. And we do that by, in many cases, taking on responsibility to also get their products and services out to the market. So that's what Emergent does, and we've been doing it for 15 years. So I think there's one more slide here that we can kind of just touch on. And this is really just a summary. I'm not going to go through these because we've talked about them, but I think just to play back what Amrinder said earlier, the webinar series is out there. If it helps to rewatch the first 3, and then you have this one that covers the last 2 principles, may be worth doing to pick up on some of the talking points or data points that you might be able to successfully adopt if they make sense for your company. So, and again, I think that's why we did this.
Great. Thank you, Alex. Really, really helpful there. This has been a great addition to that series, and we have quite a few questions. So I'm going to go right into one of them. And if you have not yet asked your question, if you have a question, please feel free to ask. We will try to get through as many of them as we can. First question here: in what ways do you communicate the importance? So essentially, I think there is 2 different people asking different strands of same question. Essentially, I think maybe, Alex, the question is, what are some of the tips and tricks that you're using to communicate the importance of these philosophical alignment to your team members? What if essentially some managers, they say, okay, yeah, this is just a little, what if they think it's just a little shallow piece there that's not really deep? Do you come across that kind of resistance?
We do, and one of the simplest tactics we use is to come up with examples and to lead by examples. So when we meet as a management team, and then those management teams meet with their people, we encourage them to share an example they recently observed in the company where someone was living out one of these principles and making it so we're giving call outs or shout outs to people that are, hey, did you see how that person has actively engaged in this other role because they're seeing that they can be helpful there? Or did you see that result in terms of how good their work ethic is? And I think looking for examples in the company at all areas and sharing them on a regular basis keeps it top of mind. And the reason it's important to look for examples and share them is because if we do it another way, if we just talk at people and say, you need to follow the framework, you need to live these principles, no one's going to respond to that. So what we're trying to always do is use examples of real people in the company to create a pull model. And what I mean by a pull model is, if I see you doing something like that, I may say to you, oh, what did you do? How did you do it? Tell me. Versus a push model, pushing it on people. So I guess the phrase we all grew up with is command and control, and we're not looking to be a command and control business. We want people to feel like they're part of the journey, and the way we keep encouraging it is looking for examples that we share.
Okay, there are a couple of more, there are 2 more questions that are also similar, so I'm going to combine them. They're talking about evolution here. So if the organization's values and philosophical values are essentially evolving, how do you kind of make sure that the people's values are similarly evolving along with that?
Well, again, the way you do it is through frequent and consistent dialogue and feedback, right? So one of the things that companies do, which some do it well and some don't, is they have structured company calls or check-in calls, but what they're not doing all the time is getting around that human conversation as well. So this is why at the beginning we were saying, like, we shouldn't have to apologize for expecting managers in the company to be more active in the communications and developments of team members. That's kind of what we're trying to do is, you know, if we're all heads down in our individual siloed jobs, maybe that's okay in particular jobs, but it's not going to be okay for a manager or a leader who wants to get the most out of the team, and, you know, and also give them the opportunity to be the best in the roles they're in. So I don't want to oversimplify this, but a lot of it just comes down to communication early and often.
Okay, another question here, maybe it's very similar, but it's more directed, is do you kind of give out like awards or rewards for projects with the highest shared value? Like, do you, like, essentially the question is, are you trying to encourage it that way?
Well,
let me add another question to it as well, that you can kind of just maybe to take them together here. So, no, maybe that's different. Sorry, go ahead. Let's take this one first. We'll take that one separately.
Okay, so something that we introduced a few years ago that's worked very well for us on this topic is we introduced both above and beyond awards, and we introduced a CEO award. So what we did is we said, look, here are our values and principles, right? And every quarter we ask peers to nominate a peer or 2 or 10 that they think are living out those principles and values. So not managers deciding, we asked the company to look at their peers and their coworkers, and they nominate people for a quarterly above and beyond award. And then those same people in the company also highlight someone that we think will be unanimously looked at as receiving the CEO award for the quarter. So for the last 3 years, we've been giving out quarterly above and beyond awards to somewhere to between 10 and 15 people a quarter. And that comes with some recognition, financial recognition. We also give out a quarterly CEO award. And what that's done is it's taught people that it's not done on bias, it's not done on leaders deciding, it's done on the community of the company at Emergn, looking at their coworkers and their peers and saying, I think Amrinder is doing an amazing job. I work with Amrinder every day. He deserves to be recognized for going above and beyond for these reasons. And they write up the reasons why they want to recommend you. It's not just a tick in the box. They explain it. And all these recommendations come in quarterly. And basically, you look at who stands out the most, and those are the people that get selected. So there is some financial recognition tied to the award, but they both are based off the value system and the principles that we share today.
Right. So I think the main outcome we can probably all look at is like the way Alex's team has done. I think it's a good role model for many of us to consider as well. And many of the organizations we understand already do that. But essentially trying to have those same awards tie in very much to the same values that the organization is espousing. And then, like Alex said, having the people write up a little bit about why they think this person really captures the values that the organization is driving towards. So if you can do that, then I think that really helps. Another question here, I think this is less of a question, just a comment here, Alex, but I think it's a good one. They say skills are easier to build, beliefs not so much. So I think the point here that they're making is that, are we sure that we can actually make those beliefs really stick with a person? Skills we can give, but beliefs?
Well, again, I think that person is right, and this is why it validates the question one results, because, you know, most people have to demonstrate they can do the job and do it well and meet the expectations that they're doing the job well before you're going to see those people, you know, and the managers, by the way, bought in. Like, it goes both ways too, right? I mean, let's forget. It's not just whether you're an employee or an employer. I have to believe in you as the CEO of the company that you can do the job I'm hiring you for, as much as you have to show up and do it. Like, we both have to validate our expectations through collaboration and working together before we both arrive at belief, before that we both arrive at philosophical alignment. I'm not going to assume you're philosophically aligned on day one just because you were excited about the job offer. I'm going to get you in the company. We're going to work together, and maybe in month 3, month 6, month 9, you know, I'm going to have an epiphany one morning and say, you know what, Amrinder, he's just amazing. He's completely bought into the company. Look how he's encouraging others. Look how he engages. So you get there slowly, and I think it's both sides that have to arrive there.
Yeah. So I think this trend we are seeing quite a bit here today, that look, for the acquisition time, the person joining time, you won't be able to have this thing. So I think that's just laid out very simply, very honest fact here. Person's going to come in thinking that they have to do that specific job for which they already know, and hopefully they'll continue to improve. But at a certain point, at month 3, month 6, maybe you can build that alignment, and then, you know, the things could really take off from there. You know, you have that winning team, you have that high performing team that we often talk about. So with that, I think we'll close the Q&A here. Thank you. I know that I didn't get through all of them, but I think I got through main strands of all the questions here. Thank you for that engaging Q&A session here. So thank you, Alex. It was real pleasure speaking to you on this part of the series here. And Neha, I believe you'll be sending out the summary to everyone who attended.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining here. We'll be sending you the summary of it. We'll sending you the slides and the LinkedIn profiles of both the speakers. So if you have any questions to catch up on more, please feel free to ask them, and we're sending you with a mail. So thank you for today.
Thank you.
Thank
And
you
Alex
all.
and my LinkedIn bios will be in the message. So if you would like to connect with us, please feel free to do that. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. Have a great day ahead. Thank you, Alex.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Neha. Bye.
Bye.